Hello, I'm Luc Brunet. Welcome to LSE Ideas. From the Cuban Missile Crisis to the ousting of Salvador Allende in Chile to the Contra War in Nicaragua, Latin America was one of the hottest battlegrounds of the Cold War. While US intervention in the region was dramatic, the latest research in the field has sought to understand Latin America in the broader context of the global Cold War. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Tanya Harmer, Associate Professor of International History here at LSE.
Hello.
Welcome. So Tanya, what's been the focus of your research so far?
So far, I've been interested in looking at Latin America's Cold War, the Cold War in Latin America, from a regional and inter-American perspective, looking at the relationships between states within the region, but also the relationship with the United States.
And what are you working on now?
I'm interested in continuing my work looking at the Cold War within Latin America. I'm working on a biography of Beatriz Allende, who was Salvador Allende's daughter, and the rise and fall of a revolutionary generation that came of age after the Cuban Revolution. So a transnational history of kind of revolutionary politics in Latin America.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'm very interested in looking at a global kind of dynamics of Latin America's Cold War. So looking very much at how events and dynamics and actors and developments within Latin America related to what was going on in the wider world.
And could you explain what you mean by, say, a global history of the Cold War in Latin America and maybe why it would be worth exploring?
Yeah, to a large extent, the history of Latin America and the Cold War has been dominated by a certain Monroe Doctrine approach in the historiography, in that most people looking at Latin America during the Cold War will focus only on the United States and what happened in Latin America. However, this doesn't really reflect the very real relationships that were occurring between Latin America and Europe, for example, or between Latin America and other areas of the Third World during the Cold War period. So I'm interested not in suggesting that the global was everything within Latin America. In my own research, I've talked about how important regional internal dynamics were, but to understand really what the relationships were between peoples, ideas, cultures that existed beyond the Western Hemisphere as well as within it.
This sounds like a very broad approach.
Yeah.
So how would an historian go about doing this kind of
Yeah.
research or doing this kind of history?
I think that these kinds of global histories can only really be written or examined, explored through collaborative work, collaborative endeavours. I think we need to bring together people with different expertise in different regions, people with different language abilities as well, and archival expertise as well, to work together to really get a sense of the fuller picture, of the whole picture.
Have you worked on any of these kinds of collaborative projects yourself?
Yeah, so there are two main projects that I've started working on with relation to this kind of global history of Latin America's experience of the Cold War. The first relates to a conference I organised in Santiago in 2009 about Chile and the global Cold War. It was called Más allá de Washington and Moscow, which means beyond Washington and Moscow, and it was global approaches to Chile's experience of the Cold War. And out of that, I co-edited a volume that was published earlier this year, Chile y la Guerra Fría Global, which I've brought along here.
Great.
Yeah. And that brings together people from 7 different nationalities, 5 different native languages, really, to explore the relationship that Chile had with other parts of Latin America, but also other parts of the world as well during the Cold War.
Okay.
The second is I organised a symposium in Berlin this September that looked at Europe and Latin America specifically during the Cold War. And that really aimed to expand our understanding of relations with the Soviet bloc and Latin America. So looking at Czech intelligence operations in Latin America, or looking at the relationship between Cuba and East Germany, or how the Cuban Revolution was portrayed in Hungary during the Cold War.
All right. And what's the ultimate goal of these very broad projects that you're undertaking?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's to actually understand what these relationships were. I think only through kind of beginning to look at the different archives, to beginning to look at the different perspectives, multidisciplinary approach, can we really understand the whole global kind of experience of the Cold War. But I think for Latin America, I think it's very important also to understand Latin America's position and place within the world today. as I said, we tend to think of Latin America as a kind of continent apart, as a region separated from the rest of the world, when in fact that wasn't true. And I think by understanding the history of the relationships in the latter part of the 20th century that Latin America had with other parts of the world, we can better understand the origins and also the future or potential for relations with other parts of the world today.
Tanya Harmer, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.